Hi, this is John Jackson Miller, Star Wars author. You're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you were looking for.
Suspicious that all the samples you've taken from Omega never yielded results. Yet one tested by Emery indicated a positive M count transfer.
Storming the spaceport would be easier than finding 30,000 credits.
I don't want to hurt anyone.
Don't be naive. Every second we're here, we're at risk.
Then quit wasting time complaining. All right. Let's try things your way.
Finally.
Across the galaxy 4 times looking for you.
5.
But you're the one who found us.
This is Ashley Eckstein, Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars The Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z.
Joining us today for a cup of coffee as we tear into we're not tearing into it, we're very excited about it. We're going to talk about the 4th episode in Season 3 of Star Wars The Bad Batch. The episode is called A Different Approach. We don't have a different approach. We've got our A-list of our favorite members of Clone Force 99. First, from Teachers in the Dungeon, Tom Gross.
Well, hello, everybody. Yes, I definitely would be qualified as a Clone Force 99. They broke the mold.
That's right.
At least that's what I've been told. Yeah, great to be here. I'm so excited to talk about The Bad Batch Season 3. Highly anticipated and excited after the first 3 episodes.
Definitely. And also joining us, he is our regular co-host whenever we talk about The Bad Batch, the one and only Mason Zehr. Mason, welcome back.
Thank you. I feel like I've on this like every single week saying thank you, and thank you every single time.
That's right. Well, at least you're not doing like Corey does in thanking, say thanks for having me on my own show.
Oh, yeah.
Like you did on Pour-Over all the time. Well, that's a topic for another day. So as we always do, Tom and I have not talked about this before. Mason and I, we kind of have, but not really. So this is all going to be a fresh conversation for us. Why don't we start, Mason, with you? Give us one word and overall thoughts on A Different Approach.
My one word was suspenseful, because every time they showed you like, oh, you have to pay for a fine for this, you need this many credits for it. You were like, oh no, what's going to happen? Are they going to have enough? How are they going to get out of this? And it's just very suspenseful.
Agreed. It's a very tense episode. Tom, what about you? One word and overall thoughts.
The word I chose is return. And I just feel like this is the episode where we finally have Crosshair back. And he makes some decisions. He lets some things happen. And he comes along for the ride, which we have not seen since season 1. And so I really enjoyed having that always in the back of your mind, wondering, does he still have pieces of the chip or those feelings that he used to have? And just watching, the other thing is watching Omega take charge and come up with a plan and watch her growth as well. So lots of things in this episode, but largely between Crosshair and Omega.
For sure. That we're going to talk a lot about Omega and Crosshair. I'm quite certain of that. My word for this would be satisfying. I mean, this episode has it all. It's got suspense. It's got drama. It's got tension. It's got a brand new Star Wars card game. I think it's the new card game. It's got some thrilling moments. And it's got some tears, some happy tears, and it just got some swashbuckling excitement. I just think it's such a satisfying episode. In the CWK Cafe, I saw a lot of people are saying this is their favorite episode yet. I'm assuming most people who say they're talking about season 3. I guess we'll kind of see what that's like as we progress with the conversation. Now, normally what I do at this point is we try to kind of walk through specific key moments, but I think, Tom, and you tell me what you think about this, and Mason, you as well, of course. Part of me thinks whenever we review something on Pour-Over, like when we recently did with the Marvels, we just kind of talk about things that really work for us and highlights and things that really stand out.
Sure.
So let's kind of try that and go from there. Who wants to start and bring up a point that how it works for them? Mason, go ahead.
I want to talk about how Crosshair says months in Star Wars, because normally we're used to rotations or some other term, but he actually says months, and I just thought that was very weird.
Isn't it cool? It's sort of very unique to hear a term used. Like whenever they would say, they never said coffee, they said calf, right? And whenever they talk about real things, I don't remember if they ever talk about months before or not, but you had mentioned that to me when we watched this, and that was kind of fun. It was one of the only times we actually got some sort of a range of time as far as how long Omega's been away from the Bad Batch. So that is a great catch, Mason, not only for the story, but just for Star Wars lore in general.
Yeah, Mason, I noticed that as well. Not so much in the context of that they used a word months that would be our calendar and not necessarily a calendar in the Star Wars galaxy, but certainly the time that had passed that made sense to me about how long. And I didn't have any idea what to expect as far as time passing between the capture of Omega and the opening of season 3. So now we know it's not days, it's not weeks, it's not years, it's months. So it's long time has passed, but not like years of time, which is what I thought was kind of important.
Long enough time to grow a ponytail.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm glad for that too.
Yes. Well, Tom, what about you? Tell me something that stood out for you about the episode.
So I'm going to need some help with a name here from season 2. It's the episode where Crosshair basically executes the Imperial officer. What was his name? Do you recall? But you know what I'm talking about.
I do. I can look it up with my Google machine while you're talking.
So while you're doing that, I'll talk about what I wanted to say, and that is another remote, slimy Imperial captain in the Bad Batch. And we're getting this idea that sort of the mid-level Imperial officers that are put in charge of these remote planets are really just kind of awful people. The one in season 2 with Crosshair and his treatment of the clones and
Lieutenant Nolan.
Lieutenant Nolan. Yes. Thank you for checking that. Lieutenant Nolan just had this like power hungry feel that he had to dominate others. And so he treated the clones horribly and whatnot. But this Imperial captain had a lust for money and material goods. And so we get to see that, and it adds to me realism, which is what the Bad Batch did for me in seasons 1 and 2. It added the sort of a raw edge to the Star Wars galaxy that we knew would be there with the Empire. We see it post-Empire in The Mandalorian, and here we see it pre-Empire, or at the birth of the Empire in Bad Batch.
His name is. In this one, his name is Captain Man, M-A-N-N. It seems like kind of a perfect name for this guy, because it's sort of like a stereotypical pig-headed, greedy. I mean, like all the way back to even before Charles Dickens. You know, you put someone in charge who's very greedy, very much out for himself. I noticed when they're playing cards initially that he's taking money off the top. He says, "Oh, business is good. That means it's a good day for me too." And the droid just opens up the cash register, for lack of a better term, and he scoops out a chunk of credits. And of course, he's got the portly little pot belly. He just fits that mold of a bossy, greedy, no good swindler. And it's interesting that you brought up Lieutenant Nolan, who was more put together, but he was very domineering and dismissive, where this one is dismissive of everyone except for himself. I didn't expect him to be as savvy towards the end. But for him, at the end of the day, I don't know how much he cares about the glory of the Empire or the First Order like you and David Waters, but more about, that's a Halcyon joke.
Yes, it is.
But I really was drawn to him too, because he's so despicable and slimy, as you said. And Mason, any thoughts on Captain Man for you?
Just like you said, he was just kind of like Lieutenant Nolan and just cared for himself, didn't care what he did to the others.
Yeah, he's I say he kind of gets his comeuppance at the end. Mason and I were talking about this. Mason, what kind of creature do you think that was?
A Rathtar.
Me too. I totally thought that's what it would be.
I mean, that makes sense, but that's not the only. Now, we didn't see one of these, but there was a certain sound effect in that sequence when a lot of those animals were being released or when they were created. And I couldn't place it at first, but Mason did. Tom, you probably did too. What noise did you hear?
I know what sound you're talking about, but I did not place it.
It was a porg.
Sure sounded like a porg. That
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean,
Yep.
I'm not duplicating it very well.
That was good. That was really good.
Yeah. Amazing.
Nice.
So-
that's a deep cut.
It was a deep cut. I don't know if it was a porg, but it sure sounded like a porg. So what stood out to me, there's a lot that stands out to me. The number one thing is the relationship between Crosshair and Omega, but we'll get to that in a second. I was so captivated by this planet. Every time I see a new planet, whether it's in this, too, because I really want it to be bad too, but not necessarily the case. Can you guys hear what I'm listening to right now?
No, you cut out for a little bit there.
Oh. All right, hold on. Jeez, my computer froze. All right. So what part did I cut out on?
Right after you started introducing you said, I think the last thing I heard you say was, we'll get back to the Crosshair.
Oh, Omega Crosshair. Okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to pull up and see the name of the planet, but Disney Plus froze on me. All right. Okay, fine. What I want to talk about, though, is this planet. Every time I see a new planet, whether it is on The Mandalorian or in The Bad Batch, there are certain times when they show like the interior of a city. And in this one, it's the tapestries and the awnings and the overhangings, and as they're walking through, and just like the furniture, the walls, the architecture all together. It always looks like Batu to me because I really want it to be Batu so badly. And that would just make Galaxy's Edge so much more vibrant to me if we get to see it in live action or in animation. But I'm constantly just so enthralled by every time I see landscape or architecture in something Star Wars. And it selfishly, we talked about the Halcyon a second ago. It reminds me of the Halcyon. Yes, it reminds me of Galaxy's Edge, but just like the readouts of the starships or the interiors and the way they're navigating through that little city. I just think there's something so magical about the structure of Star Wars, not only with the story, but just the buildings and just all of it, the architecture itself. I just think it's so cool because they just make it seem like it's one big connected thing. And maybe it's not fair to say, but like when you're using something like fantasy, like, swords and dragons fantasy, you're in a dungeon, you're in a forest, whatever. And it's pretty much like you can go with that conceit, but for it to stay the same, and maybe this isn't even that important of a point, but it's just something that I really like and just makes Star Wars feel much more alive to me.
Oh, certainly. I mean, creating an environment, creating the setting of a story is so important because the characters have to integrate and have to be a part of that. And I know exactly what you're saying. When they first did that overview shot of the city, my first thought was, whoa, that's really like it was crowded. Those buildings were like kind of on top of each other. And I took note of that as well. And just, I think I'm with you. The other part to build on that I really like are the new ships.
Yeah.
This cargo ship that they fly. I'm like, that's cool. I don't think we've seen that ship before.
Maybe in season 2, was there something like that?
Maybe.
I don't know. But there's a nice connective tissue in that as well.
Yeah. So Anyway, but I hear you, and I do find that interesting as well to see the different landscapes and in both the similarities between cities and land, so that you have that like connecting thread to all of the galaxy, but then also how they are different and have their own planetary sort of feel to it.
Yes. Mason, anything you want to add about that? I mean, or do you want to advance to the next topic?
No, I think that's good. I agree with you. It reminded me that little feel of Batu.
Awesome. Well, you are up next. What's another key aspect of this that you'd like to discuss?
Probably the meet when they meet each other.
Oh yeah, talk about that. You're talking about at the very, very end?
Yes.
Yeah, feel free to talk about that. That'd be great.
So my favorite part is probably when Hunter's walking out. I forget exactly what he says, but it's like, we've been out there so many times looking for you, is what Wrecker says. And he
Wrecker
says
like, we've searched the galaxy 4 times.
And then Hunter says 5. And then they all reunite, and then there's like happy tears, and then Crosshair walks down the stairs, and then it just ends, in the ominous feeling.
What a great cliffhanger that is. We've been waiting so long for this reunion, and I'd say with a lot of nervous energy, because you talked about earlier, Tom. Now, we haven't really seen them unite together since, what'd you say, season 1? But I would take it even further. We've never seen them around each other where they're consistently getting along. I mean, even in the final season of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, we're first introduced to the Bad Batch in those first 4 episodes, when they first, Echo first joins the team. There was always terrible tension. Crosshair was always nasty.
Yeah.
And now she says, I had some help. And he walks down that ramp. And they just look at each other, and the music, and it just kind of cuts. I mean, it's not a sucker punch, but boy, oh boy, does it take your breath away as we can't wait another week until the next episode.
Yeah, I have to wonder if this is where, if we'll have one of those beginnings to an episode that starts where the last one finished. So we get that moment. One thing that I caught on this, and I could only think about our buddy Corey Clubb, is the lighting in that moment, because when they have the pullback shot where you see the ramps of both ships, and Omega and Hunter back by the ramp of the Marauder, and Wrecker's just a little in front of them. When Crosshair walks down, it's darkness in the middle, and then the lights of the ships down on the people, and with the dark in the middle, which I thought was just, I kind of wish they would have gone back to it another time, because it's only a moment, but I was like, oh, look at the chasm between them, and what will that look like moments from now? And the other thing I was looking for in that moment are the faces of all of the clones. Well, I guess Omega's a clone of the adults, and going from Crosshair's face, and then when Wrecker turns around, I thought we might get a little more reaction, but I think it was just perfect, because it was just sort of like there was going to be a sneer there, but it never materialized. I love that tension. You could cut it with a scissors.
Well, it's true. What I like a lot about this, and the lighting you mentioned is a pretty astute observation, because the light is behind him and he's walking through the darkness, because the darkness is the unknown of how they're going to react to one another. When Omega and Wrecker are across from each other, as they're running toward each other, I thought, this is only episode 4. Are they really going to be together already? Oh my gosh, something terrible is going to happen, because how could it not be in your mind after all this stuff with Tech? So it's pulsating through my pores. I'm like, no, oh my gosh. And then that happens, and they hug, and then Wrecker gets tears in his eyes, and I was like, oh, this is emotional. And then, as Mason just said a few moments ago, so we looked around the galaxy for you 4 times. Hunter says 5. We missed you, kid. And he hugs her. I got choked up. I really did. I mean, I didn't start to get the salty discharge that Jerry Seinfeld talks about, but I definitely was very moved by it. It was so beautiful. I did not expect to see it so soon. But when you look online and people talk about there being tears, that's it. And it's welcome happy tears, because for them it's a few months, which probably felt like an eternity. But for us, I don't remember how long it was on our real calendar between this and when season 2 ended. But I don't know, has it been a year? I don't know if it's even been quite a year, but it seems like long, because we get
Feels like it.
pieces of entertainment that just come out all the time in various mediums and shapes and sizes. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it's just great. But because it's Star Wars, you get that high emotion, and then boom, they take the rug off on you, because what's going to happen with Crosshair? I do think it's important to add that Crosshair, I believe, has his hands down at his sides. He's not in a defensive posture. He's not holding a blaster.
Yeah.
He's just completely like
approaching neutral
and completely not on guard in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So that's good. Let's talk about Crosshair. I think in this episode, I mean, we see little hints of it throughout the first 3 episodes. He's not in the second episode. And he continually refers to her as not the kid or something random, but he calls her name, Omega, which people in the CWK Live this week had mentioned that a lot. And I hadn't caught that when I watched it the first time. That was nice to see. I think the biggest sign to me that Crosshair is better, I mean, if he hasn't proven himself by now by how he helped her escape and the way he treated her, to me, that's good enough. But there's still that trepidation. And when she says, here, take the credits, and he walks away, but then he comes back, there's that. But then there's the fact that he's kind of like a dog on a leash, like a rabid dog. And when she's playing cards with Captain Man, she is able to hold him back without any force or effort. And he keeps telling her, with my skill set, this will be over in a second. She does like the negotiation to get the 30,000 credits to get off the ship, or to get off that planet, which is called Lau, by the way, LAU.
Oh yeah.
He gives in. He doesn't try to fight her. He doesn't seem annoyed. He's not condescending or patronizing. He doesn't insult her. He did all those things in seasons 1 and 2. He's better. He's different. And it's a little early to say, but one of the things I love about the Bad Batch is that every season I get a new favorite. My first season was Hunter. Last season, my favorite was Tech. And this year, so far, I'm scared to say it aloud, I think it's Crosshair, and it's for the reasons I just talked about. But let's talk about what the two of you noticed about Crosshair. Mason, why don't you start?
Yeah, he's had a lot of heart change between the seasons, and I think it was like a year for us. At least it felt like multiple years for us. And he just goes along with Omega now and actually calls her Omega and respects her more now.
Are you nervous when you're watching these that Omega's going to get, or that Crosshair is going to be more like his old self? Or what do you think has changed about him?
I think what has changed him is when he saw Lieutenant Nolan, how he was treating the clones. He was thinking, am I treating them like this? I'm going to try to be better myself.
Oh, I like it. I had not thought of it that way. That's really cool. Tom, what about you? What are your vibes on Crosshair early in season 3? I mean, of course, especially considering this episode.
Yeah, there's still a small piece of me that I don't think for a second he's going to do anything that will harm or put Omega in peril. But what I still have some nerves about is that he will abandon. More out of guilt of what he's done to them than so much he wants to hurt them or harm, that kind of thing. I just feel like he's carrying a lot of guilt and weight, baggage, and that like when she tossed him the credits and said, "You go," and he took the turnaround. I was like, oh boy, this is old Crosshair. Because, how many times did he turn around and walk away from the Bad Batch? But then when his shoulders dropped, I was like, no, we're going to get him back. And he turns around and he follows. And I just thought that was so cool. It was such a wonderful moment. Because you have and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you have the stubborn Omega who's like, I'm going this way and I'm going to save my animal, save Batcher. And this is what I'm going to do. And that's just the way Omega is. Love it or let it irritate you, but that's who she is. And I love it.
I love it. And
so to see that he's willing to go along with it. And you mentioned this, Dan, about how, my this would be over faster if we used my skill set. He even says to her at one point when she says, this is the plan, he goes, you're wasting my talents.
Uh-huh.
Which I was like, wow. Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
But that leads to this was a favorite of mine. Since we're heading that way, I'm going to say it. When they are surrounded at the end, and not at the end, but the sort of the climax with Captain Man. Yeah. They go to rescue Batcher, and he out of nowhere he says, "I knew you'd come looking for your animal." And then they all come out, the Imperials as well as the locals, with their little vibro staves, and it's so wonderful because Omega throws the bag of coins to Captain Man, and then says, all right, let's try things your way. Oh,
I know. What a great scene.
It's when you said he's been on a leash, I'm like, oh, Omega just let the leash out. Just let it go. Oh man, it was so great. It was so great. And I did have some nerves that he would miss shots because of what was previewed and foreshadowed earlier, but his shot was on. His shot was on.
It was on when it's like it's just completely letting that leash go. And who let the dog out? Omega. Omega,
right. And when you look at their relationship throughout this entire episode, really, you can go back to when they're in prison. It shows a collaborative relationship, because really Omega's kind of been in charge. Excuse me. She's been in charge, except for the moment when he says to her, when they're escaping the prison planet, and he says, do you remember Operation whatever number? And 72. She says, of course. Tech made me memorize them all. And that's the only time he really took charge, in my mind, that I can think of. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's been really Omega the whole time. But here she says, okay, let's do it your way. And to me, it's like, let's use your skill set. Let me use your talents right now to help us here. And I get goosebumps talking about that, because I think it's such an important character moment for those two.
It's fantastic. They've never really necessarily teamed up or trained together that I can remember, but they both know the rule book backwards and forwards, for lack, I know it's not called the rule book, but she says in episode 3, Hunter made me memorize all the, you know what I mean?
I can't think of it there. Yeah.
Do you know what it is?
It was Tech who did.
Yeah, it was Tech.
Oh, she says Tech did. Oh, that's right. Of course Tech.
And then Crosshair says, of course he did.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. You had a good memory, buddy. Yes, that's exactly right. And I think that's pretty great. Or when Crosshair says, I could take out half these people now before they even knew what happened. And he could. But she says repeatedly, I don't want to hurt anyone. And she is, I mean, I don't know how anyone could not love Omega. She's just, I keep saying, boy, they're going to be in my top 10 favorite Star Wars characters. My top 10 favorite Star Wars characters is probably as big as the Big Ten football conference. There's like 75 teams in it. That's probably how big my top 10 of Star Wars characters is. But Omega
that was great.
Is fantastic. She's really fantastic.
Big 12.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about Crosshair and their dynamic. I mean, we've covered a lot of it with talking about Crosshair, but when I think about the two of them together, They are the perfect yin and yang, the perfect balance. Because as they said in what the first episode, you're too trusting. And she says, you don't trust enough. And I think it's fair to say that she is softening him through all of this. And I think it's pretty clear, besides the examples we gave, but when they're playing in that bar, and I thought, when I watched this again today, I thought, how great that Tom Gross is going to be on because we're playing a game, right? And this to me, Mason, you would know, you're the sabacc expert here. Even Matt Martin would agree to that. You know it's true. Did that look like sabacc to you?
I mean, at first when it showed like the 1s and 2s and 3s in like it looks like Greek writing, I thought, oh, this could be sabacc. But when she played those 3 cards to win with those symbols, it did not look like sabacc.
It was like red and like a kind of a
yellow
pinkish,
and like a
red.
pinkish. Yeah.
Oh, there's a big giant sunspot on it. I didn't see dice, but you've got those great credits. By the way, the house fan used to sell like a really nice, and so did Galaxy's Edge, a really nice gift card, but it was a credit. And it was this big gold thing that you could actually spend. I don't know if they still exist or not. But at the time of this recording, none of Stars.com has not given a Bad Batch episode guide for this episode or anything like that. So I don't know what that card game is. But I'm sure it's going to come out and we'll know it by heart by the time people listen to this, or even by the time it comes out. But Mason, any thoughts on just the game and that whole experience with Omega, Captain Man, and everyone, and that Trandoshan?
It looked very fun, but it shows you how experienced and trained and how much effort Omega puts into everything.
Ah, good catch. Like a certain 10-year-old boy that I know as well. Tom?
I'll be honest with you. When she sat down at that table, all I could think of was you, Mason, on the Star Cruiser, just taking control of the table. And what it made me think of, and again, gonna need some help with some names here. Who's the or maybe you just said it. Who taught her how to play those games? Sid. Mm-hmm. There it is. Sid taught her how to play all those games and made her a very astute player, understanding strategy and whatnot. And so, it's cool that it throws back to that here she uses the skills that she learned in the previous seasons. So I think that's just awesome.
What was that noise, Mason? Did you drop your...
My headphones dropped.
The Bach deck? Yeah. I love the tension of that game. I mean, sometimes when you're watching people play cards, I mean, the best is The Sting with Paul Newman and Robert Redford. This isn't The Sting. But when you don't know the rules, even like when I used to watch James Bond movies and they played Baccarat or whatever they would, I thought they played that and they played other card games. And everyone would get excited when James Bond would do a clever hand. But if I was being honest, I wouldn't know what that meant or how they won. This almost looked like, first it almost looked like, but the 1s, 2s, and 3s almost looked like a galactic version of blackjack or something like that.
Oh.
But who knows? Again, it'll be fun to find out. And if they do sell a deck, I'm sure the three of us will own them. But I loved it. We had the precedent was already set with Captain Man skimming off the top from the droid bartender. When Omega finally wins, and we all kind of knew she would, even though Crosshair wasn't so sure. And she started to get off scot-free. I actually, for a brief second, thought it was going to play out that way, but then no. He's got to get, 10,000 credits from her? Yeah. When she just opens up, here you go. 10,000 credits is easy to count. But it was, I don't know, I just really liked that scene. There was nothing really super profound about it, but it just shows, again, as Mason said, Omega works hard. She's very serious and focused. But she also had that element of like the slickster in her. My luck can't keep lasting. My luck's going to run out eventually. And the Trandoshan's like, oh, yeah, that's true. Or that's probably true. It's all from Sid. Of course it's from Sid, who we haven't seen at all yet. after the way she completely stabbed all the Clone Force 99 in the back, even letting Omega get captured. So I guess we can move on from there. Are there any other key things you want to talk about in this episode? I will say I liked it. It started right away with the captured shuttle coming through hyperspace, crashing right away onto this planet. I'm sure no intergalactic insurance company would ever insure Omega or the Bad Batch. They're always crashing on planets. But I just love it. Just from start to finish, it didn't slow down. Even like the moments where there wasn't a battle or something happening in space, there's still all that wonderful tension because you know Hemlock is chasing them. If the Emperor has already given carte blanche to say anything you need from the Empire, you've got it. We're not sparing any expenses. No manpower is off the table. You've got this. So you're extra frightened because as clever as Omega and Crosshair are, if the entire Empire is chasing you and everybody's money hungry and there's no loyalty, it's frightening. So I think it's sort of a master stroke that they keep the pacing throughout this entire thing.
And you mentioned a couple things there that have been on my mind, and that is the opening sequence with the shuttle coming down. And I thought there was an amazing moment of patience from Crosshair after they had crash landed, where Batcher kept knocking his seat and kicking the seat or whatever he's doing behind him, and Crosshair never becomes angry with the animal. He just stands up, pulls the seat forward, and the creature jumps out. So I don't know. That's sort of a non-entity, but it was on my mind. The other is Hemlock. Man, when we talk about how slimy Captain Man is, Hemlock is he's ruthless. He is. I don't know. I can't think of a word bad enough for him. But when he walks into, and I forget her name, is it Lamassu or
Nalase?
When he walks into her room or cell, I can't tell if she's in it looks like she's in a cell at this point. And he basically says, without a doubt, we're going to find them. What's not so sure is your future. Now I paraphrase there.
That's pretty accurate.
But it was so threatening. And that race doesn't show emotion very well, but boy, you could see after he walked away, her eyes go to the floor and her head droops, and you just feel the dread in her. But I have to say though, that there's probably a bit of her that feels comfort knowing that they don't have Omega at the moment.
I agree.
And she knows how resourceful Omega is too. So
yeah, it's amazing that you can feel sorry for a Kaminoan, like to this degree. Like you see the sadness in Nalase's eyes, and that's a credit to the animation and the voice acting as well. Mason, any last minute things you want to say about the episode before we give our letter grade and final thoughts?
Nope.
Okay, well, let's do it. Who of all of these episodes, let's give a letter grade. And just sort of, last and sort of explaining your letter grade. And then maybe do you want to rank the episodes so far, the first four, just for fun?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'll start.
Oh, okay.
Just to give you time to rank them. I would give this one, I would give this one an A+, a low A+. I mean, it's the emotional impact of just that final sequence is just so wonderful and such a nice, I say this quite a bit on the 10 and a half years history of the show. It's hard to wrap up a storyline or a story or a series and feel like it's satisfying. Like where they're not rushing it or skipping a beat or just doesn't work out the way you want. I don't know what I wanted or when I wanted it, but boy, was that wonderful seeing Omega hug those two. The Crosshair sequence at the end is a really nice touch to make you realize we're not out of the woods yet, and I wonder what's going to happen with the four of them. All the action, the suspense, that card game drama with Captain Man, the interplay, and some great lines between Crosshair and Omega, and Batcher being Batcher. I don't know how many times on CWK Live this week, Greg McLaughlin was trying to labor to Hasbro to make a toy batcher, but I think it's working, buddy. I think it's working. So yeah, I would give this one a very low but very satisfying A+. And as far as ranking it, I still think 3 is the best one, and then 1, and then this one, and then 2. I mean, they're all great. Every episode is terrific. I've been telling my students, the Bad Batch now has eclipsed Clone Wars is my second favorite animated series in Star Wars.
Okay, wow, that's big.
Yeah. Okay, Mace, what about you, buddy?
I give this one an A+ because I love this episode so much, but it didn't reach my A+ level of episode 3. And I would probably rank this one second, and I would have 3 at first, this one second, 1 at third, and then 2 at fourth.
Great. So good. So it's a lower A, like mine, it's a lower A+, but still an A+.
An A.
So
an A. Okay.
Oh, okay. I thought you said A+.
You said A+. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, okay. Some things to think about there. You guys are influencing my grade here. All right. So here's how I give it an A. It is an A. It's not a blow me away episode, but certainly has many, many moments of, as we talked about, we covered them all, and just so much meaning that goes into this. For me, gives it a solid A ranking. Just some final thoughts about it is, I know there's a story I was going to share. So at the end, when they have that moment we talked about, where they're both standing at their own ships ramps and whatnot, I watched this. So I full confession, I watched this episode on a phone. So I got to watch on big screen at some point. But I was laying down after a long day of work, and I was watching it, and I was a little sleepy, but I never fell asleep. But I had a sensation of just profound relaxation and relief at, here's my word, at the return of Crosshair to the Bad Batch. At least we think so. We think so. But there was that profound, just like, just, I don't know, if you can sink a little bit lower into the couch because like your muscles just relax. That's what happened to me. So that's kind of my final thought on the episode. As far as rankings go, have you ever walked upstairs of like a museum or something that has those stone steps that are like, they're not a full step. They're just kind of like a mini step. Like they're so awkward to walk up because you're not getting, that's how I rank these. Okay. So this one, I give my number 1. Episode 3 is my number 2 episode. And I just go back in inverse order as 1, 2, 3, 4, but they're all like those little museum steps as far as they're almost on the exact same. And I think the only reason they build why I go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 is because of the last one. The last one makes 3 makes 4 great, 2 makes 3 great, and 1 makes 2 great. And so far, I personally have not had a spike in like, oh my gosh, that episode blew me away. So solid A's for all of them, but this one definitely solid A. And I cannot wait to see what words are shared next on the Bad Batch.
Indeed. I just want to say I was leaning towards A as well, but the only thing that pushed up to an A+ for me, a low A+, is the emotions I felt with their reunion.
100%.
That was
I'm
it.
with you.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
All right. Well, it looks like our coffee or hot chocolate, in Mason's case, has run its course for this episode of Coffee with Kenobi. Thanks, everybody, for joining us as we talked about a different approach, the 4th episode. Tom, please let everybody know what is going on with Teachers in the Dungeon and where they can reach out to you.
Yeah. Speaking of adventure, we cover an adventure of a different era and universe and multiverse, I suppose you could say, of Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games. And so Teachers in the Dungeon, Dan Ream and I are the co-hosts of that. And these days we've been, we created a very strict schedule of our episodes every single month. And we do an interview episode. And then the next week we talk about creatures. The week after that, we talk about our Waterdeep adventure. And the week after that, we talk about, I forget now.
But what about the fairy folk in the recent one?
Yes, we talked about Fae in the most recent creature episode, which actually no one noticed, at least not yet. It was out of order because those Fae, man, they mess with things. They trick you up. And so we've got it out of order in that month. It's only the second month and we already out of order. It's all right, though. So, yeah, we're just covering all sorts of Dungeons & Dragons fun on Teachers in the Dungeon. So to follow that, if you're interested in that type of thing, and we've talked about the Star Wars role-play game before on one of our Gen Con episodes, but you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram, Teachers in the Dungeon. We have a Facebook page, a YouTube page, Teachers in the Dungeon, and we're also on X at Dungeon Teachers.
And Mason, can you still be found practicing your dribbling skills on a basketball court?
Yes.
All right.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.